All right, so are you ready to dive deep? Today we're tackling mindset and relationships.
Ooh, fascinating topic. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of this.
I think so too, especially
Hmm.
because we're going at it from all these different angles. We've got Eastern philosophy, psychology, self-help. Should be interesting to see how it all ties together.
Right. That's what I love about these deep dives. You never know what you'll discover.
So, to give everyone a bit of a roadmap, we're really going to zero in on how a growth mindset can not only impact our own personal growth, but also transform our relationships.
Makes sense because our mindset affects everything, right?
Exactly. And then we're going to look at those key ingredients for healthy relationships,
Hmm.
communication, empathy, being able to see things from like different perspectives, that kind of stuff.
Incredibly crucial stuff. I'm excited to get into it.
Me too. So let's start with the foundation, which I think is the growth mindset,
Yeah, it's more than just thinking positive. It's like a fundamental belief that we can change and grow.
right? And Atomic Habits really like spells out how we can rewire our brains, through consistent effort.
Absolutely. And it's not just about habits. Shift your perspective. That audiobook really digs deep into the power of choice, like actively choosing to believe in our ability to grow and learn.
It's like taking responsibility for our own mindset. I think Annette's story from Master Your Mindset really brings this to life.
Totally. I mean, she totally transformed her career, going from a job she hated to running a successful pet care business.
Right. Like, talk about a major shift. And it wasn't just luck or anything.
Absolutely not. It was her growth mindset, that belief that she could learn and adapt. That's what propelled her forward.
So, like, how did that mindset actually change her approach?
Well, think about networking. She used to be so hesitant, almost apologetic. But then with this growth mindset, she started seeing those interactions as chances to learn and grow.
It wasn't about being a natural at it. It was about the mindset.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that shift led to more confidence, more resilience, and ultimately more success.
Okay, so if a growth mindset can help us with something as, like, nerve-wracking as networking,
Imagine what it can do for our relationships.
right? Because let's face it, relationships can be, well, messy.
Yeah.
And sometimes our emotions can really cloud our judgment.
Oh, yeah. Remember the analogy from Everything is Fracked?
The feeling brain as a verbally abusive boyfriend.
Yes. Terrible with directions. It's such a funny image, but it so accurately describes how our emotions can totally lead us astray, especially in high stakes situations.
Like when you're in the middle of an argument and you know you're not thinking clearly, but you just can't help yourself.
Exactly. And that's where understanding the neuroscience behind our emotions can be so helpful.
Which is where hardwiring happiness comes in. Like
Yeah.
the idea that those negative experiences can literally get like hardwired into our brains.
Right. And that creates these thought patterns, these habits that are so hard to break.
Okay, that's kind of scary. So if we can rewire our brains for positive habits, like Atomic Habits says, can we also rewire them for, healthier relationships?
Absolutely. And that's where the growth mindset comes back into play. Instead of getting stuck in those negative thought loops.
We can choose to approach those challenges with a different perspective.
Exactly.
Instead of blaming our partner or getting defensive, we can try to see it as a chance to learn and grow together.
Precisely. And that shift in perspective can make all the difference in how we communicate, and how we resolve those conflicts.
It's like choosing a different path, one that leads to understanding instead of like resentment and distance.
Exactly. And that brings to mind Frank's story from Master Your Mindset. Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah. How his fixed mindset, which he totally got from his childhood, was like affecting his job prospects and his relationships.
Right. It led to a lot of blame, a lot of defensiveness, and ultimately, it was isolating him.
Yeah, it was like he was trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage.
Hmm.
And it was just so different from Annette's story.
Completely different. Annette's growth mindset allowed her to build those stronger, more fulfilling connections.
Right, she was open to growth. Okay, so we've seen how mindset plays a huge role in relationships,
Hmm.
but how do we like bridge that gap between our thoughts and how we actually interact with people?
That's where empathy and perspective taking come in. And that's what we'll discuss next. So we're talking empathy and perspective taking. It can be so tough, especially when we're feeling, hurt or angry.
Totally. Like our first instinct is to protect ourselves, not exactly see things from the other person's side.
True, but I think that's where some of these Eastern philosophical concepts can be so helpful.
Okay, I'm thinking about Ask the Awakened
Yeah.
and its discussion of emptiness and non-being. To be honest, those terms kind of throw me off a bit.
I get it. It's about detaching from our own egocentric perspectives.
So basically trying to see the world through someone else's eyes,
Yeah.
even if we don't agree with their view.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our own perception is limited. And in relationships, that can be so powerful.
Okay, I can see how that connects, but how do we actually do that? Like, it's one thing to, like, intellectually get emptiness, but how do we actually, put it into practice, especially in those heated moments?
It takes practice for sure. Cultivating a willingness to really listen, to try to understand where the other person is coming from without judgment.
That makes me think of what Krishnamurti talks about on fear. Observing fear without judgment.
Exactly. It's like applying that same principle to communication, creating space for the other person's experience.
And not immediately jumping in to defend our own position. Choosing understanding over being right.
Exactly. It doesn't mean we have to agree, but we're willing to at least try to see things from their side.
Like we're expanding our own field of vision.
Yeah, exactly. And that can lead to, more compassionate, more fulfilling relationships.
So active listening is key here. Really being present, trying to understand what they're saying, not just waiting for our turn to talk.
Absolutely. It's a skill, but it's worth it. It lets us connect on a deeper level.
And I think that's something we all want, whether it's in our personal lives or at work.
Right. Definitely a universal desire. And it's within our reach if we develop the right mindset and tools.
So it's not about finding the perfect partner or, having some magical relationship formula. It's about doing the work, developing our empathy and those communication skills.
Exactly. Relationships are constantly evolving.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Growth mindset, empathy, perspective taking, and how all that contributes to healthier communication and connections. Where do we go from here? Like, how do we actually put all this into action?
That's the question, isn't it? Let's get into some practical tips for strengthening our relationships using what we've learned from all these sources.
All right, let's get practical. Hit me with those actionable insights. What can we really do to make a difference in our relationships?
Well, one of the most important things, and I think it's often overlooked, is self-compassion. Hardwiring happiness and the happiness trap both talk about this.
Self-compassion.
Yeah. It's like offering ourselves the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend.
I guess constantly beating ourselves up doesn't really help our relationships, huh?
You can't pour from an empty cup. We need to be kind to ourselves if we want to show up for others in a healthy way.
Okay, so self-compassion is like the foundation for stronger connections. It's interesting because the how of happiness also talks about gratitude, and I'm wondering if there's a connection there.
There is, definitely. Gratitude helps us shift our focus, appreciate what we have, including the people in our lives.
So instead of focusing on what our partner isn't doing, we appreciate what they are doing.
Yeah. And that appreciation, it creates a sense of connection. It makes us more likely to, approach conflicts with understanding.
Okay, self-compassion and gratitude. Got it.
Yeah.
But what about communication? Are there specific things we can do to communicate better,
Yeah.
especially when we disagree?
For sure. One technique that keeps coming up is using I statements.
Oh, yeah. Classic communication advice.
Mm.
But sometimes those I statements feel a little forced.
It's about the intention. We want to express our feelings and needs in a way that's direct and honest, but not blaming.
So instead of saying, you always do this, which puts the other person on the defensive.
You can say, I feel hurt when this happened.
Right, taking ownership of our own experience.
It invites the other person to respond with empathy, instead of getting defensive.
It opens the door to understanding.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of, promote yourself really highlights how important things like empathy and communication are at work.
Dan Schawball makes a great point. Those skills are often seen as, nice to have, but not essential. He argues that they're actually crucial.
I like that because I am trying to level up in my career, and it's good to know those relationship skills are valuable in the workplace.
They are, and it's not just about getting ahead, it's about creating a more positive work environment.
Creating a ripple effect of positivity.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the idea of interconnectedness. Our inner world and our relationships, they're linked.
Right. As within, so without.
Exactly. So the journey of personal growth is really important. It's not just about individual self-improvement. It's about creating a more harmonious life for ourselves and everyone around us.
Okay, so we've covered practical tips like self-compassion, gratitude, using I statements. But what about those times when we're stuck, in those negative patterns that are hard to break?
That's where mindfulness and meditation can be game changers.
It's like hitting pause on autopilot so we can choose a different response.
Yeah. Mindfulness helps us become aware of our thoughts and feelings without judging them.
And meditation gives us that inner calm, so we're not swept away by emotions.
Right. They're like building blocks for resilience and self-awareness.
So important for dealing with the ups and downs of relationships.
For sure. It's amazing how all these sources, even though they're from different backgrounds, all point to these same core principles.
Yeah, it's all about cultivating a growth mindset, embracing empathy, and doing that inner work so we can have more fulfilling lives.
You got it. And remember, this personal growth journey, it never really ends. We have to keep applying these principles.
Showing up every day willing to learn and grow. But let's be real, that journey can get messy. What advice would you give to someone who's struggling in their relationships and feels stuck?
That's a great question. The first thing is to really look at your own behavior. Are you blaming others? Getting defensive? Are you communicating your needs clearly?
So self-awareness,
Yeah.
but that can be really hard. It's easier to blame others than to look at ourselves.
It is hard, but it's important. And once you see those patterns, you can start changing them. And that's where things like mindfulness and meditation can help.
So interrupting those automatic reactions and choosing a better way to respond.
Exactly. But remember, it's a process. It takes time.
And a growth mindset, right?
Mm.
Believing that we can learn and grow. But it's not all about doing the work alone, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we need help.
Oh, absolutely. Another part of growing in relationships is being willing to step outside your comfort zone, trying new ways to communicate, being more vulnerable, maybe even talking to a therapist.
Being open to new possibilities, knowing we don't have all the answers.
Right. And you're not alone in this. There are so many resources out there, books, podcasts, support groups.
So reach out for support. Tap into the wisdom of others.
Exactly. And every relationship is different. What works for one couple might not work for another.
So no one-size-fits-all solution. We have to find what works for us and be open to trying new things.
Exactly. Relationships are work in progress, right? There will be ups and downs, but with a growth mindset, open communication, empathy, and self-awareness, we can navigate those challenges and create truly fulfilling relationships.
It's all about embracing the journey, believing in the power of growth and connection.
Exactly. And speaking of growth, one of the sources, Think by Design, talks about this idea of a whole human mindset.
A whole human mindset. I never heard that one before. What does that mean?
It's about remembering that people are more than just, their job titles or their roles in our lives.
See the whole person, not just the parts that are, convenient for us.
Yes. Recognizing their worth no matter what.
I like that. So if we approach others with this whole human mindset, we'll treat them with more respect and understanding.
Exactly. And it creates a space where everyone feels seen and heard, regardless of their, imperfections.
Such a simple concept, but it can change everything. It's like we're shifting from seeing relationships as transactional to seeing them as genuine connections.
You got it. And recognizing that everyone's on their own unique journey.
So instead of judging people, we try to understand their experiences.
Exactly. And that understanding leads to more compassion and empathy, which is so important for building those strong relationships.
Okay, wow, we've covered so much. Growth mindset, empathy, communication, and now this whole human mindset.
That's a lot, I know. You don't have to master it all at once. Just start with one small step, one change.
And trust the process.
Exactly, because even those small changes can make a big difference in our relationships and our lives.
This has been eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, you can always go back to these sources, explore them more.
Absolutely.
There's always more to learn. And that learning, that growth, it's a lifelong journey. And I think one of the coolest things is that it's a journey we can take together, supporting each other along the way.
That's a beautiful thought. It's like those strong, healthy relationships, they're not just the destination, they're part of the journey itself.
Exactly. And speaking of the journey, have you ever thought about the concept of non-attachment? It's something that comes up in a lot of these sources, particularly those rooted in Eastern philosophy.
Non-attachment. I have a vague idea, but I'd love to hear you unpack it a bit. It sounds a little counterintuitive, like shouldn't we be attached to the people we care about?
It's not about not caring. It's more about, not clinging. It's about recognizing that change is inevitable, that everything is in flux.
So instead of trying to control everything and everyone, we accept that things will change.
Right. And that acceptance can actually bring us closer to the people in our lives. It allows us to appreciate the present moment without being so afraid of losing it.
So it's about finding freedom in letting go.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It's about finding a balance between, cherishing the people we love and allowing them the space to be themselves.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we cultivate that sense of non-attachment without becoming, emotionally detached?
It's a practice for sure, and it starts with, I think, understanding the nature of our own minds, how we tend to cling to things, how we create stories and expectations that can lead to suffering.
So it's about becoming more aware of our own thought patterns, our own attachments, and how they might be like creating obstacles in our relationships.
Exactly. And then through practices like meditation and mindfulness, we can start to loosen the grip of those attachments.
It's like we're creating space, both within ourselves and in our relationships, for things to flow more naturally.
You got it. And that flow, it's where the magic happens. That's where we find true connection, true freedom, and true love.
Wow, that's really powerful. So it sounds like non-attachment is not about pushing people away or suppressing our emotions. It's more about, embracing the impermanence of life and finding a way to love more fully in the present moment.
You nailed it. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. So we were talking about non-attachment. It can be such a powerful concept when it comes to relationships.
It can, but it's also kind of tricky to wrap your head around. I mean, shouldn't we be attached to the people we love?
It's not about not caring. It's more about not clinging so tightly that, you lose yourself or the relationship.
I see. So it's about recognizing that change is a part of life and that you can't control everything.
Exactly. Acceptance is key here. When you accept that things will change, it frees you to appreciate what you have in the present moment.
That makes sense. So it's about finding freedom in letting go a little bit.
I love that. Letting go of those expectations and fears can bring you closer to the people you care about.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? How do you cultivate non-attachment without becoming emotionally distant?
It definitely takes practice. It starts with understanding your own mind, noticing how you cling to things, how you create those stories and expectations that ultimately lead to suffering.
So being more mindful of those thought patterns and how they affect your relationships.
Exactly. And then practices like meditation and mindfulness can help you loosen the grip of those attachments.
Creating space for things to flow more naturally.
That's it. And that flow, that's where the real magic happens,
Yeah.
true connection, freedom, and love.
Wow, that's beautiful. So non-attachment isn't about pushing people away. It's about embracing the impermanence of life and loving more fully in the present moment.
You nailed it. I think that's a perfect way to sum up this whole deep dive, actually.
Yeah, you're right. We've explored so much, from the power of a growth mindset to the importance of empathy and communication, self-compassion, gratitude, and even the concept of a whole human mindset. It's been quite a journey.
It has, and I think the biggest takeaway for me is that building and nurturing strong relationships is an ongoing process, an adventure filled with twists and turns.
And it's a journey we don't have to take alone.
Absolutely. We can learn from each other, support each other, and grow together.
I love that. So to all our listeners out there, remember that you have the power to create the relationships you desire. It starts with taking those small steps, those little actions every day, those little shifts in perspective that will lead you towards more fulfilling connections.
So true. And don't be afraid to reach out for support, tap into those resources we've discussed, and most importantly, trust in the process.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Keep diving deep, everyone. We'll see you next time for another deep dive exploration.